Skipper Pat Cummins and West Indies head coach Darren Sammy pointed to the contrast in skill levels between the two batting lineups as a deciding factor in the contest.
Someone like a Steve Smith coming back, he might not have played at Granada, but he's played, on lots of wickets where you've got to find a different way to score, and it might not just be, big drives down the ground or whatever it is. You've got to kind of scrap your way to a 50, and I think that comes through, experience. I think, even someone like Semi, his learning curve from first game to this game I thought was really good. He moved, really well on a tough wicket. So that's all you can kind of really ask. But, with experience, you've seen a lot of the same problems before. You have a level of, calmness that you can work your way through the problem. So as a captain, it makes my life a lot easier knowing you've got lots of settled players there.
You look at Steve Smith, how he played, very leg side-ish. But when you look at his wagon wheel, when the ball was on the stumps, he respected it. We had a lot of bowl downs and LBWs by being probably aggressive on the good length. And these guys were relentless on that length. So a little bit of mindset, a little bit of technical work has to be done. But I do understand the journey that I took on. And it was, Rome is not going to be built in a day. So a little bit of patience, a little bit of reality as to where we're at. Is it something that we are aware of? And then continue to put in the work.
Fazir Mohammed joins us via Zoom as we review the contest. Faz, Sammy just said that Rome wasn't built in a day, but it did take a really long time to build. I remember at the start of the series we were contemplating the type of wickets that would have been prepared, and we said that, okay, it would be seamer friendly, and maybe, just maybe, the contest would be a little bit closer. West Indies ended up losing by 133 runs. I mean, in the scheme of things, it really wasn't close, was it?
No, it wasn't. But let me deal with the Rome wasn't built in a day thing first. Yeah, you see that sort of metaphorical foolishness? It really means nothing, because what we have is that for the last 28 years at least, every coach, every captain, every administrator has said, well, we're in a rebuilding phase. This is a transition period. Rome wasn't built in a day. The law took 7 days to create the world and rested, 6 days and rested on the seventh, and so on and so forth. I think it is convenient if you were born last week Monday. But the fact is that West Indies have been losing more than winning for 28 years. For those who are in their mid-30s and younger, they know nothing of a dominant West Indies team in Test match cricket. So therefore, for them, unless they have an appreciation of West Indies cricket, and sadly, even those who are involved in the cricket have no appreciation of West Indies cricket, they would think that this is perfectly normal to be averaging 30-something, to be averaging 28, to be playing 30 Test matches with a 20-something average, that is something to be commendable, to be commended. But the reality is that West Indies have been stuck in this mire, as I said, for almost a generation. So this convenient excuse of now planting the seeds and so on. We've been planting seeds for 28 years and we haven't seen much of the fruit as far as team performances. So again, that excuse will wash with those who were born last week Monday, but for those who have a greater appreciation of West Indies cricket, not wanting to sound elitist or anything, but who just will happen to understand where West Indies cricket was for a long, long time, that metaphorical foolishness doesn't fly.
Australia didn't quite revert to type in their second innings. They had to take their time. Mind you, taking their time is still going at 3.39 runs per over as they scored 243 in that second innings. As far as the West Indies were concerned, we only survived 34 and a half overs before being dismissed for 143. I mean, we've seen the dismissals. We knew that the pitch was always going to be deteriorating. But I also get the sense that there's a lack of commitment and a lack of fight in that second innings. I'm not sure if you spotted that as well.
I wouldn't go that far, Donald, because I think the players are trying as best as they can. But again, and I think the Australian captain, Pat Cummins, touched on the very obvious point. If you've got players with considerable experience, playing in different conditions in different parts of the world, raging turners in India, seaming tracks in South Africa, hard bouncy pitches in Australia, green tops in New Zealand. And they also play a lot of high quality first class cricket in their domestic game. There's always a greater chance that they can adapt, that they can adjust. And as you said, there was one session where Australia scored at 2 point something. Then the next they scored at over 4 because they had wickets in hand and were going after the bowling. And then when the wickets tumbled, it slowed down. But again, they were already ahead of the game. The thing is that for a lot of the West Indies cricketers, you might see a fairly decent amount of first class cricket to their names, but where is the quality to say that these players can immediately transition from the regional game to the test game on testing surfaces? And that's why I would say that I wouldn't say that necessarily is a lack of fight or a lack of commitment, but as Pat Cummins also said in his comments to Darren Ganga at the end of the match yesterday, it was basically putting the ball in the right area and let the wicket do the rest, and the match will come to them. That reflects an appreciation that sometimes when you are aware of the situation, you don't have to do anything spectacular. Just do the basics right consistently and you'll prevail. But for those who don't have that experience, just being consistently accurate or consistently determined, even on the batting side, presents a formidable challenge.
So I reckon it was the perfect negative storm then, because the only player with that level of experience batting-wise, he was playing in his 100th test, and he could barely get the ball off the square. And with him having the most experience, he was the one that's out of form.
Indeed, and again, it's not about saying it to decry his achievement of playing 100 test matches, but among those who are batsmen, he has the lowest average at 32 point something for 100 test matches. And that tells you the state of West Indies cricket. It doesn't decry Craig Brathwaite for his determination, his application, his willingness to give his all and give up his best at all times. But what it tells you is that we are in a culture of mediocrity, where we celebrate ordinary performances rather than go back to our legacy of outstanding performance. And I'm not just talking about the 70s and the 80s, I'm talking about generally for West Indies cricket prior to the mid-1990s, and let our players appreciate that, look, we had set the bar as far as test match cricket dominance, way beyond anybody else has been able to come close to achieving. It's not about burdening them, it's about letting them be aware and therefore aspiring to those high levels. That's why I always make the point. Would Jamaica track and field say, you know what, this 9.58 thing that Usain Bolt set in Berlin, however long it was, nobody could get close to that. So let's petition the IAAF to make it 9.78. So then everybody has a better chance. They'd laugh you out of town. But we seem comfortable with mediocrity to the point of celebrating it rather than saying, look, you've done okay, but really, this is the standard. This is where we want you to go. This is where we know you can go because others have done so successfully and for a long period of time.
Yeah. And Faz, coming into this test match, there was a decision to include the short form players into this long format. And a lot of people, some of them raised eyebrows, others felt like, they would be a good fit. We had like the likes of John Campbell, Casey Carty, Brandon King and Shea Hope. Do you think that experiment worked?
It's had mixed results so far. I would have been one of those who would have been skeptical about it, but Brandon King shaped up well for his 75 in the first innings. Shea Hope batted very well in the first test match and had that unfortunate dismissal like Roston Chase. And yesterday, yes, his dismissal looked ugly, but it was because he recognized that, look, you can't get the ball off the square. And again, it's because of that lack of experience. Because, again, his test match average is less than 25. John Campbell's, same thing. So, again, players tend to play to their average. That's why it's called an average, because it sums up all that you've achieved, the highs and the lows, and finds the average, and therefore it's basic arithmetic. What they have to do is to try to rise above that, by consistent high quality performances, which doesn't happen overnight. It takes a tremendous amount of work. So whether it's the introduction of white ball players or sticking only with those who are dedicated to the red ball format in the region or in county cricket or whatever, at the end of the day, you have to raise the bar. You can't be saying these are our legends and they have numbers that wouldn't compare anywhere close to the real legends of West Indies cricket.
And speaking about legends, one of the bright sparks of this entire test matches had to be Shamar Joseph, and he's new to the setup. We can't forget that he recently was discovered and he joined the West Indies setup. He walked away from the test match as, the leading wicket taker with 14 wickets. But one of the things Coach Sammy had outlined, looking back at what took place with the bowlers, he commended them, of course, Faz. But speaking about that period after lunch, I think if you were to look at that, that's where all the bowlers would have lost their stride, or we would have lost part of the match, because of course the batting gets the blame for it, for me, and the catching. But after that lunch period, I don't know what happens, because if you look at all the innings at the start, we're dominant, we're going with 3 wickets down, going to have lunch. And when we come back, I don't know what happens. Maybe we should not eat lunch.
Well, whether I eat lunch or not, the thing is that it is about understanding that as a bowler especially, and you've got 1 spell, 2 spells, 3 spells, sometimes the conditions aren't the easiest. You're bowling against someone who's well set, like a Steve Smith who's going after you, as he did in that afternoon session on the 3rd day. And you've got to adjust. You've got to maintain that tight line and hope for the mistake. You don't want to get too adventurous, but you've got to bowl like one side of the wicket, just outside off, or if you're targeting the stumps in the case of Smith or anyone else. But whatever the tactic is, you've got to be consistent at it, and you can't allow yourself to be thrown off line when someone is coming after you. You've got to be able to adjust to be able to meet that challenge, for example. And again, I'll reference Shea Hope, who was batting way out of his crease yesterday to negate that swing and movement and trying to get an opportunity to score. So there was a thought process. It's not that they were just swiping and hoping for the best. There was a thought process. It's just that unlike the Australians, and again, referencing what Pat Cummins said, they've got so much more experience, so much wherewithal that they can adjust. Bowling as well. You saw Shamar Joseph going after Nathan Lyon, not just yesterday, but also in Barbados. Did he look rattled? Did he look flustered? No, because they've got the match in the bag. So he knows that at some point, one is going to turn a bit sharper or bounce a bit more. It's going to get the top edge and the catch will be taken. It's awareness of the situation. In the same way, if Steve Smith or Travis Head is coming after you, what do you do? These are things that you should have in your mind already, because you know that's the way they play. And therefore, sessions like what happened, as you referenced, on the Saturday afternoon, these things happen sometimes in the game, but also it's about the bowlers countering whatever the batsman is doing with their own tactics to defy what the batter is trying to do.
Now, following scores of 4, 4, 0 and 7 in the series so far, the Windies coach Darren Sammy has cast doubt over Craig Brathwaite's place in the team ahead of the 3rd test, which bowls off in Jamaica on Saturday.
He hasn't looked good this season, this series. And in a team where you're searching for performances, you get very close to say, okay, do we give somebody else a chance? But we will really have a good discussion, myself, the selection group, and the captain himself, about that particular situation.
The thing about it, Faz, it has been really woeful. His last 25 innings, you see there 446 runs at an average of 16.4 with a high score of 61. He's just scored 2 half centuries during that time. But to take a look at the average, 16.4, he has got long rope. And he hasn't utilized the chances given to him, Faz. And it's also a little bit disappointing because if he's at the end of his line for this test series, it's at the end of his line for his test career as well.
I would think so. And the fact that Sammy was willing to entertain the thought of leaving him out suggests that they're seriously considering it. And you really can't argue it. I think this is where these things crop up. People say, how you could drop somebody with 98 test matches when they're on the verge of 100. I remember Curtly Ambrose bowing out of test cricket with 98 tests. And when he was told, if you go to Australia, you can play 100 test matches, he said, I'm not interested in that. I don't play for the numbers. It's like Ryan Mulder declaring a 367 not out against Zimbabwe today because he felt that only someone of the stature of a Brian Lara should have a world record of 400, apart from the fact, which I think is the really important thing, the South African, certainly he, doesn't play for the records or play for the numbers. He plays to win. And therefore, if West Indies are going to be preoccupied with who has 98 test matches and who has 99 and who is 5 away from 100 test wickets, never mind they can't get anybody out, and who's this and who's that and do the other, then we'll be where we are right now. Craig Brathwaite, as you said, look at those numbers. They're stark. Shivnarine Chanderpaul's test career came to an end in 2015 when he averaged 18 against England, and before that 15 in South Africa. And people were cussing and getting on and saying, it's victimization to stop him from going past Lara and so on. The fact is that his numbers suggested that his test career was over. Same in the case of Craig Brathwaite. Whether they'll do that next Saturday afternoon for the day-night test match, we'll have to wait and see.
Speaking of that day-night test match, Faz, it is going to be a spectacle here at Sabina Park, and I'm looking forward to it. I probably will go a couple of the nights, right? But I think it's only spectacle on the surface because, as you mentioned before, the idea of the West Indian cricketers being experienced in test cricket, even less experienced in day-night cricket and against the pink ball. I mean, now that we look at the big picture, you have to wonder as to the reasoning behind playing a day-night test in Jamaica. But what are you now anticipating in light of that fact that it's an inexperienced West Indies squad that's going to be facing a rampant and experienced Australian team under the lights at Sabina Park?
Well, 18 months ago, Donald, under lights at the Gabba, known as the Gabba Tour, the West Indies famously won by 6 wickets, the first ever test match victory in Australia for 26 years. So maybe there's some precedent there. But again, just the general trend of the series and the performances suggests that, again, Australia will dominate. And you've got someone like Mitchell Starc, 6 wickets away from 400 test wickets in what should be his 100th test match. So again, there you go. You have someone who doesn't have any question about his performances. He's coming up to 100 test matches as a left-arm fast bowler. You'd probably think closer to the end at the beginning of his test career, but no one is questioning his place in the side. The Aussies don't play cricket that way, where you have people just hanging on for the numbers. Famously, Ian Healy was begging to play a final test match at his home ground at the Gabba. And the selector said, no, we have a fella by the name of Adam Gilchrist who's been waiting for a couple of years to get his chance. Adios, it's somebody else now. And sometimes it can be harsh. Sometimes there can be a level of compassion. But at the end of the day, are you prioritizing the individual or the team and the welfare of West Indies cricket, as in this case, or Australian cricket, as in their case? And I think more cases than not, the Aussies prioritize Australian cricket over the individual. I don't think we can say the same of West Indies cricket right now.
Faz, it's been a pleasure as always. We'll catch you on Friday, hopefully, as we preview the test which begins on Saturday at Sabina Park.
And let's hope the lights stay on.
One can only hope. We take a break. Back with more after this. Stay with us.